Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, Ron, I am thrilled about our interview today with Mr. Brad Rhoads. And I got to tell you, wives out there and husbands, but wives, you are going to be thrilled about this podcast. When I listened to it, I immediately called my husband and said, I can't wait to send you this podcast. I can't wait for you to hear what this guy, Brad Rhoads, has to say to inspire strong marriages. And he's so articulate. He's so inspiring. He leaves me excited for what my marriage could be. Yeah. And so before we jump into it, I thought we could have a little bit of fun. And we both represent different marriage seasons. And so I wanted to ask you, first of all, how long have you and Miss Pam been married? And second, how do you celebrate your date day? A lot of this podcast is going to be about the intentionality of time in your marriage. Yeah. And so I'd love to know how you and Miss Pam move toward each other in that way.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And first of all, we are in different seasons, and there's a sub-season that we also deal with on our date day. So I'll explain that in very brief. But this June will make 35 years for my wife and I.
Congratulations.
That's
huge.
So
35 years.
Hard to believe that number is quite as large as it is.
Wow.
It is incredible. I love one of my friends who early on in ministry, he was talking and he says, man, my wife and I have been married for 11 wonderful years. And she elbowed him and says, it's been 12. He said, yeah, honey, but that first year wasn't so good. You know, it's amazing the seasons we go through. And my wife and I celebrate date day, and day and evening at times are very different for us. My wife has had health challenges through much of her adult life. She has suffered with a invisible illness for a number of years, and then later had cancer and a stroke as a result of the cancer treatment. So my wife, while leading a somewhat normal lifestyle within the home, rarely leaves our home. That's just a part of our life. And this has, gotten more and more closed in this space as we have headed into older years. And so for us, our date time is sometimes picking a favorite TV show and watching it together on a weekly basis, or maybe we'll binge watch a show together. And so we will have that time. The other time is, being intentional, coming home from work and debriefing the day and talking through those items. But the days of my wife and I going on a date is just about past, just based on our season of life. Sure. She spends a lot of her energy watching our granddaughter 2 days a week, and that takes a lot out of her to recover the next day or so. And so we know where each other are, and we always have a single show that we love to watch. And we spend that time together. How about you, Marianne? How long for you and Chad? And what's your date look like? Probably very different than Pam and I at this point.
Yes, we are headed into year 21.
21.
Living a very, very busy life. My husband is an executive pastor, and I travel and speak and write and do lots of different things. And I'm an Uber mom, and I have teenagers, an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old. And so our life is very, very, very busy, and we are being pulled in many, many directions. But one thing that my husband really fights for is our date day. He has Fridays off. And so we celebrate a whole day.
Nice.
My kids are in public school. They are our babysitter,
Yeah,
free
there you
babysitting.
go. Nice.
Though I think we make up for it paying for track and football and basketball, but whatever, I'll pay it to get time with my man.
That's awesome.
My husband is a huge coffee drinker. And guys, when I say coffee drinker, this guy has a coffee subscription.
Mm-hmm.
He likes to drink coffee, literally, we call it bean sweat. He drinks the coffee literally squeezed from the bean direct.
Oh, my word.
He is legit coffee drinker. So we always try to find a fun, cool coffee shop around DFW. And I'm a foodie, you know this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we like to eat internationally. And we like to try new things internationally with food. And so we always find a fun coffee shop, and we always find a different restaurant from a different nationality. And we also do something called love mapping. And I don't know if you've ever heard of love mapping, but my husband has written out over 150 questions because here's the thing. We all change over time.
Yes.
The person that I was year one and the person that he was year one is not the same person that he is at year 21. And so we do love mapping periodically, and he has 150 questions. And when we sit down at coffee or at dinner or at lunch, we give each other a number. And you have to read that question. And they're fun questions. Some of them are serious. Some of them are, because we're changing. Yeah. Even my love languages have changed from year one to year 21. Yeah. And so love mapping helps us kind of continue to map out and listen and see how we're continuing to change and what our needs are. And so that's kind of how we do it.
We're going to have to bring him on and interview him on for these 150 questions. I can tell you that.
They are fantastic.
Really
questions.
Good. We've got to schedule that. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. It is. And here's the thing that Brad has talked about in his area, and we'll debrief on the other side of this, but it is about being intentional and time. He uses the term leftovers. Now, leftovers is a dirty word in our home.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly the way he describes it, but my wife does not generally like to eat leftovers.
I'm with you, Miss Pam. Me neither.
No. X you out if you could see me right now. I personally think when food sits in the refrigerator for 24 hours, it gets better.
No, it becomes a science project. Okay.
No. The seasoning just permeates through that food and it gets richer. You and Miss Pam would get along perfect. So where I value leftovers in the context of what we're going to hear from Brad Rhoads today, leftovers are definitely the dirty word. And as Marianne just gave the little vomit sound, that's the way you need to think about our leftovers when we give them to our maid. Yeah. So let's pause. And then when we come back, we're going to jump into this interview with Brad Rhoads.
Splink is a simple way to help families in your church link together spiritually. It comes as a free weekly email with ideas that parents can use to have fun, make memories, and talk with their kids. Those teachable moments give moms and dads opportunity to share spiritual truths and life lessons. And no matter how busy life is, there's always time to Splink. Share d6family.com with the parents in your ministry so they can sign up today to start receiving free weekly Splink.
Brad Rhoads started the law firm Rhoads & Rhoads Owensboro in 1996. He had the privilege of serving as special justice on the Kentucky Supreme Court and being appointed by the Kentucky Supreme Court to the Bar Admissions Committee. Brad was ordained as pastor of marriage at his local church in 2011. He writes, leads marriage groups and conferences, and has developed Grace Marriage Coaching. Brad has been married to Marilyn Hudson Rhoads for 20 years, and they have 5 children. Brad, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we're talking about a topic that's it's something that a lot of people are dealing with right now, and I think this is going to be a very, very practical listen for our listeners out there. We're talking about how to stop marriage from getting our leftovers. Now, before we get into that, your career is very interesting. We often hear about people leaving ministry and going into another career, but you left the legal field to go into ministry. What led to that change in your career path?
Well, it's an interesting answer. God performed a miracle in our marriage early on. So we did marriage wrong for about a year and had a stagnant, complacent marriage. And then God broke us, and we just started doing things differently and started having a blast. But God had given us favor with marriages, so we started doing individual counsel. My wife has a counseling background. And then in the law practice, I was the owner of the practice as well, part owner. So my experience in business coaching, where you would work on your business consistently, get out of your business and work on it, I realized, what if couples got out of the marriage and worked on the marriage and spent time casting vision for their marriage like I was for business? Could marriages take off with a more proactive approach? And we started one, it worked. I was shocked, but ended up out of the law practice completely.
Now, which is more stressful, dealing with marriages or dealing with law?
It's interesting. I would say they both have unique stresses that are significant. I would say I've probably been more stressed in grace marriage than I was in the law practice, but the law has really unique stressors, being in conflict all the time, always being adversarial relationships. So I would say it's been equal. Yeah.
Well, it's obvious that marriage ministry is very important to you, and you're leading a breakout here at the D6 conference dealing with this and talking about marriage and marriage getting the leftovers. Before we jump into the fix for that, I want to ask the why question behind this. Why is marriage getting the leftovers so much in 2021 in our marriages?
Yeah, it's multifaceted. One, you don't have enough encouragement from the church. 72% of churches, according to Communio, have no marriage ministry whatsoever. Because one of my board members said, marriage will never be more important to the congregation than it is to the church. And people will be no more intentional with their marriages than the church is with marriage ministry. So that's one reason. Another reason, we're in a faster society. You have more distractions. You have cell phones. We have evolved into more of a kid-centric society. So a lot of time demands have really pressed in. As a result, you have fatigued, distracted people that limp along in marriage, and either they're okay or they're struggling.
Now, the fix is probably not just an easy solution. I wish it was just something that we could just kind of, here's 3 steps to fix it. But I've heard you say it basically comes down to a choice on our part. What is that choice?
It's simpler than you think. I mean, if a couple we say schedule your life around your marriage, not your marriage around your life. So what Meryl and I do is we just take off the top time for us. I mean, so we block off a night or an afternoon a week, and that's just for us. And we tell our kids that taking care of our marriage is key to us in parenting, key to us in everything. And why is it so revolutionary just to take time for each other to protect your most important horizontal relationship? So one, just schedule time together. And the Gottman studies show that if you have 5 hours of undistracted one-on-one time, you're likely to be in the top 3% of marital satisfaction. So it's really not rocket science. They liked each other enough to get married. They had enough personality connection to want to get married. What happens is lack of time together, stress, fatigue, distraction, distance, coldness, crisis.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I guess the word that came to my mind is intentional, and what you're saying there with that choice. Do couples, do they make it more difficult than it needs to be?
Yeah, they do. I mean, a lot of times a lack of time together and a lack of intentionality, what happens is that breeds problems. I mean, that's just like if you don't take care of a garden, a lot of weeds come up, and then it takes a lot of work to take care of the weeds. So what happens is you have couples not taking really good care of their marriages, then they look up and there are a lot of weeds. There's contention, there's frustration, there's not feeling close, there's all this stuff. That stuff's not hard to avoid, but it's pretty hard to fix.
And I guess the weed example, it made me think that, like, weeds don't just, I mean, some grow overnight, but they take some time to grow and grow some height. So it sounds like these are problems that are long-term, that kind of gradually come. It's not just one night was good, one night's bad.
But my experience, both individually and with other couples, if couples will stiff-arm the world, make time for one another, then understand what it looks like to build a marriage on the foundation of the grace of Jesus, it's not as hard for people to have great marriages as they think. It's within people's grasps. It's just you have to go counterculture, because nobody's just going to encourage you, hey, don't do anything, but just hang out with your wife. just do nothing, just chill, talk, enjoy, no stress, leave your cell phone. Just nobody encourages that direction. Church isn't encouraging it very much. Others aren't encouraging it. People aren't doing it. In our society, our churches, and our culture are taking hits because of it.
Yeah, and that's what you said, do nothing but just hang out with your wife. That sounds so countercultural right now, because some people would just jump out of their skin because it's like, I have to do something. I have to be up doing something. I have to have my phone in my hand. I have to have my TV on. I think we don't think about that too often.
Jesus told Martha, Martha, you're worried about many things. You're stressed about many things. But Mary just sat and did nothing at the feet of Jesus. Mary chose relationship. Martha chose activity. And we're in a culture that's choosing activity, not relationship. And as a result, we're just missing out on what God has for us, both in relationship with Him and with one another. Because relationships where satisfaction comes, not in productivity, not in success. It's being close to Christ and close to one another.
I hear from a lot of people who are just on the brink of exhaustion. Work takes a lot out of them physically and mentally. Then they come home to their kids. They've got baseball practice. They got to cook dinner. The kids have to do homework. And then all is said and done, it's like, okay, it's time for bed, and I just have nothing left. What do we do when our mental and physical energy has just been sapped?
One, I'd say, accept the Lord's grace, and it's okay. Don't panic, because it's like I try to fix myself when I get to that point, and I just find myself more anxious and more stressed. So one, don't feel condemned. It's normal. But two, God gave us patterns for living. 24 hours a day a week for the Sabbath made for man because he needs it. So 24 hours a day, don't work, just chill. We need it. And make time for one another. And realize there are seasons where exhaustion's a reality. Child health crisis, all kinds of stuff. And when you do it, just keep spending time together. When we were both at the brink, exhausted, we still spent 5 hours a week together. We'd sit down at a table on a date, and my wife would just start bawling because she'd hold her emotions in all week. And as soon as we sat down, she would just unleash tears. And but time together is rich. And even though it wasn't all that pleasant and didn't look all that good from the outside, it kept us close in times of fatigue and exhaustion. So you can't let fatigue and exhaustion prevent time together.
And I know some people are going to say, well, we just don't have the time. I wonder if sometimes we just waste the time. Are you seeing that with couples that maybe they actually have more time than they think? They just spend it in ways that it's kind of wasteful?
I do. But also it's just a prioritization issue. We call marriage the most important horizontal relationship in our life, and then we say we can't find time for one another. So if you're going to say something's most important, it's just natural that I'm going to give that off the top time. So it's really a prioritization issue, and then letting everything else work around that. Because if you just take what comes and schedule your life, you're not going to have time for one another. And if you do, it's going to be fatigued. And we do waste time. But I don't think that's primary. I think primary is prioritization. And fatigue breeds wasted time, because when I'm really tired, what do I want to do? I want to watch Netflix. I want to watch TV. Why? Because I'm so tired. I don't have much mentally or spiritually to give. So what do I want to do? Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Which I like, by the way. So.
Yeah, that's you're hitting the nail on the head right now, and I'm feeling a little conviction inside right now. Well, this past year with the pandemic has just been crazy for everyone. And it's amplified stress in people in different ways. And I know for some, talking to them, their marriages have felt more stressful than ever before. What are some practical ways for couples to manage stress within their marriage, whether it's during a pandemic or when everything is perfect?
Well, during the pandemic piece, it's grace. So if your spouse was a little snappy during the pandemic, they're probably a lot snappy. If your spouse a little withdrawn, probably a lot more withdrawn. And it's loving your spouse despite their fallacy, despite their sin, and pursuing them. While we're yet sinners, Christ died for us. While my spouse is a sinner and struggles, I'm going to die for them, because we're to love each other as we've been loved. So don't take offense at the manifestation of stress. Pursue. So what earlier on in our marriage, the tendency we had is my tendency is to go cold, to withdraw, and to get sarcastic, witty, and a little bit rude, or a lot rude, depending on if you ask me or her. And but so Marilyn's tendency was, when I would do that, would be withdraw from me. Now she prays from me, she pursues me, she thinks Brad's having a difficult time, he needs a helpmate. I'm coming after him. And when Marilyn gets stressed, she cries. She can't sleep. Her back and hip hurt. As opposed to thinking, man, this stinks for me. It's like, my babe's hurting. Pity the man that falls and has no one to help him up. God ordained me to go help her up, not to take offense and tell her to get out of the ditch. So it's a rescue mentality where you extend grace in time of struggle, and also you commit. COVID, no COVID, we're going to spend time together consistently. We're going to extend grace, and we're going to prioritize marriage. We're going to have a marriage. If there's 50 marriages, they're all going to look black and white, and we're going to look in color.
Wow. Yeah. You're saying that, and when you say that, I'm thinking, yeah, you're putting the grace in your ministry. I mean, you are living it out there, because there's such a tendency in our world to say, how does this affect me? And it's all about the self, the selfishness, the person, and, why are you upset? And, what did I do wrong? I love that focus on grace that you put there. And I think we overlook that. The world definitely does.
Absolutely.
I think as Christians, as believers, as me as a person and as a father and a husband, I miss that too. And I'm glad you said that. That's really good. Well, with your work at Grace Ministries, I know you've seen some wins with couples. What kind of transformation can we expect when we begin to prioritize and invest in our marriages?
People find God gave us a great gig in marriage. And when people started just going deep emotionally, feeling uniquely connected, enjoying each other physically more, doing fun activities together, it's like, I love being married. And they find themselves wanting to spend time together. And the testimonies we hear over and over is the power of grace. Like I'll say, I used to be frustrated at my spouse because what they did wrong. Now I'm not. I just love my spouse with all their good characteristics, all their bad characteristics. I chose to love them, and as an act of the will, I'm going to love them. Marilyn, I love ADD, overcommitted, stressed out Brad, and I think he's cool. It's not, hey, if you change and become this, then I'll love you. So we hear over and over. I had one couple, the guy tends to overwork, and his wife lived in constant frustration. He overworked. One night he was working till late. She sent him a text, Grace, it's all good. Can't wait to see you when you get home, smiley face. And I talked to the guy. He's like, I'm packing up my briefcase. He's like, I want to come to her. Grace is magnetic. Now he doesn't overwork anymore. They date once a week. He said, I don't even want to overwork anymore.
I love that. That's a very encouraging and hopeful message. Well, as we end, can you offer and speak directly to our couples out there who are listening and saying, this is us, we're stressed, we're in a bad place, our marriage just gets the leftovers of our time and our energy. Can you offer them a word of encouragement and just a word of wisdom, just to kind of lift them up in the struggle that they're in?
Yeah, be not conformed to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So just say, we're going to be part of the answer here. I mean, the norm right now, stagnancy, complacency, dominated, fatigue, no. We are going to spend time together. We are going to extend grace. We are going to exercise the Sabbath. We're going to live according to the ways of God, not according to the ways of the jacked up, chaotic, stressed out, anxious, depressed world. And to whatever degree we struggle, it's all good because it's covered by the grace of God. It's for freedom He set me free. Light yoke, easy burden, rested soul. I can live in the Sabbath rest of Christ. All the pressure is off me. Now I'm going to enjoy Jesus, and we're going to enjoy each other. So we have to start being part of the answer. We can't just complain that lost people act lost and lost people make lost decisions. We have to be married saved. We have to be married in ways that people watch us be married to one another and are drawn to Jesus. How do you know Jesus is real? How do you know? Because I watch Christians love each other in their families, and it's just beautiful. It's affectionate. They want to touch each other. They laugh together. They give to each other. They give each other grace. It's a beautiful picture, and I want a piece of that picture. But until we start living that way, we can just expect the steady and constant decline of marriage. And unless we change the paradigm and how marriage is done, we're going to lose the institution completely. It's eroded to a point where 40% of Americans, according to Pew Research, believe it's an obsolete concept. And until we start living it out in a way that's beautiful, healthy things last, unhealthy things decline. And in our churches, in our homes, we can't allow marriages just to be stagnant or okay. We have to say, we will invest. And at Grace Marriage, we have a pathway for you to do it.
Well, as a husband, this has been very good for my soul to hear this. Just very encouraging, just a good, hopeful message for those out there, for a couple, whether you're struggling or whether everything is going really well for your marriage. I appreciate what you've shared, and I appreciate your ministry because you're changing lives with what you're doing.
And don't be condemned. I mean, if you're stagnant, if you're that, it's okay. His mercies are new every morning. Just wake up and today spend time together. Today extend grace. All the past is covered. So many folks have trouble moving forward because they're frustrated with their spouse's past and their own past. No, every day's anew. Marilyn will have a terrible day. We'll look at each other and laugh the next morning and both say grace and enjoy the day like the day before never even occurred.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing this. I think it's something that all of us need to hear and all of us need to put into practice. I know it may not be as easy as we think right away, but I do appreciate you sharing that it is a lot simpler than we might make it out to be.
It's hard to fight. It's hard to go upstream against culture. I mean, it's hard to stay off your cell phone. It's hard to say no to things. It's hard to make space. It's hard to practice Sabbath in a society that doesn't practice it. You're right. It is hard, but it's a lot better.
Yeah. And you've given us some great ways to start this out and some great principles to apply. So thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ron, this is such a phenomenal interview. And I said amen so many times.
Yes.
So thank you, Brad, for your wisdom and just your passion to fight for marriages. And you spent a lot of time using the word time. And one of the things that stuck out to me that I highlighted and I drew an arrow by is if we will spend 5 hours of undistracted one-on-one time a week, I believe is what he said, it leads to being satisfied in marriage.
5 hours is not a lot. So, but yet in our busy schedules, it's a ton.
Yeah.
But when you hear it say it, that how can we carve out 5 hours? Let's think through that for a moment. Where do we need to get 5 hours? We don't need large blocks.
We don't.
Let's take a page from Deuteronomy 6.
Right.
A few moments in the morning, a few moments when we're heading out, maybe a phone call on our way home. Undistracted time somewhere in the evening where no devices, no TV, and just a conversation.
I was so blessed by his language in the how. He said, we've got to schedule your life. You've got to schedule your life around your marriage, not your marriage around your life.
Yeah.
And that he's right. He's so right. There's truth in that. There's this tension in my spirit with God. You're going to have to show me how to do that. You're going to have to show me how to do that because I want that to be true of my heart. Like I want my husband to know he is my safe place. Jesus is my safe place first. And then beyond that, when I need to run to my safe place and my steady person, it's Chad. Yes. And I don't want him to feel like this is what I have left over.
That's right.
So here you go. And here's the thing. We're emotionally and spiritually and mentally spent. And so what exactly are we giving to each other? And he mentions, when he's done, he binges television. Yeah. So he has nothing left for his wife. And
right.
I don't want to communicate that. I don't want to live like that.
In fact, I walked in the door last evening and this is confession time for me. I teach a class one night a week. Generally, I teach one class each semester, and as an adjunct professor. And this class this semester meets live on Zoom from 5:15 to 7:45 every Monday night. And so I walked in to the house last evening, and I usually try to get home an hour and a half early on a Monday afternoon. My work is such that I can knock it out anytime and often find myself doing some work, later in the evening if need be. And yesterday was just a crazy day at work. We had a lot of team meetings. We're close in on, a lot of planning for events and other items. And there was just a lot going on. And I walked in about 20 minutes before class was there. And I just walked into my wife and I looked at her and says, "I'm so sorry." She smiled back at me. She didn't give me any guilt or grief, but I felt guilt that I was not giving her the time. I walked in and basically had to just walk right on up to my study and prep for, opening up the class and getting ready. And I feel like she definitely got my leftovers last evening. And that's not the way I want to live our marriage.
Well, and he actually speaks to that, and I'm so thankful he did, just talking about grace. And
Yeah.
when we as the spouse are understanding and extend grace in such a specific way,
Yeah.
that makes you want to make time for her.
That's
That
right.
makes you go, okay, I'm rearranging and I'm going to say, I see time in this. I'm a visual communicator and I'm a visual learner. And I see elements like this in the Jenga game, and how you've got the Jenga game. And when you're pulling and you're saying yes to one thing, it's pulling from something else.
Yes.
But you're also building to the top. And so really what you're able to, when your wife is gracious and she understands your call, and it's not your call, it's our call. And so I'm going to support you in our call, because that's
right.
I can never ask my husband to choose between him and the ministry. It's one and the same. Let me just encourage my friends out there that is battling that in marriage. I can never ask him to do that. His call, we're a team.
That's right.
And so yes, when you're pulling from the Jenga from the bottom and you're placing it on the top, yes, you're pulling from the bottom. And so it is messing with some stability in that. But when she's gracious, that almost replaces that hole. Jesus's grace, because that's what he does. He fills the holes, the brokenness in our lives. And it stabilizes the Jenga game,
It does. I want to tell our listeners, the value of our mates are typically what is referred to as the brake and the accelerator. There are times that one of you are the accelerator, whether it's in spending or intimacy or social or whatever it is, and the other one is the brake, and what God does is he combines those two pedals in a car of a marriage to balance us out so that we don't binge one item or totally put the stop to something. And so what Marianne's saying in ministry or work or career, if you're listening, when you come home, guys like to compartmentalize. We want to shut off the day, but keep mentally thinking about it. And that's a great opportunity to debrief the day and go, hey, here's a situation I faced today. Give me your thoughts on it. How did I handle it? What were these dynamics? And you're inviting them into your world so that they are sharing in your world.
That's right.
And you're valuing their input and their opinions as well. It's a wonderful thing to be asked your opinion. And if you want to show value to the people that matter, ask their opinions over everything in there. And you'll find that brake and accelerator. They'll give you an opinion and perspective you didn't think about because you were so pressing one pedal or the other in that moment. Now, Brad said this. He said, when the marriage is in distress, I love this. The natural inclination is to withdraw.
Yeah.
But he said, I challenge you to pursue your mate when your marriage is in distress.
Yeah.
The person who works late to get that text that rather than, hey, I wish you were home, or beat them over the head with guilt, I can't wait, and drop that little, hey, I'm looking forward to our time together.
Yeah.
And that would so make me want to close down my laptop and just run to that. What did your heart do when you heard that? And how does that apply to people you see in church or you and Chad?
Oh,
Yeah.
When he used the progression, and the three that I really honed in on was distance leads to coldness and coldness leads to crisis. And I just want to be real here. After 21 years of marriage in the ministry, we've lived in that state before.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, we have lived through seasons of our marriages in a crisis because of neglect, and not just on his part, on our part. And so just because he may shut down, he may not have capacity, and so there's not a balance maybe in time management and work-life balance, he may be away. Women, we can detach emotionally, which is just as dangerous as them not being home. You know what I'm saying, ladies?
Yes.
We get this cold-hearted, I'm not speaking to him because he hasn't been here, and it's this cold emotional disconnection. We use it as a weapon, and I'm saying some really hard things right now, but I'm just being honest about the weapon I choose to use. When I'm offended and I feel neglected, I reach for the sword of cut off. I'm going to emotionally cut him out where it feels like crisis. And I love that he said, couples need to stiff arm the world. We're letting the enemy win when we let our emotions drive us, and we're letting our hurt drive us, if
That's
that makes
right.
sense.
So let me step in from the guy perspective. The moment you pull out the weapons of that, I'm not speaking to you, or I'm withdrawing from you, or extracting any part out of what you know is a contribution to the marriage, the guy pulls out a weapon as well. Yes. Well, I'll just bury myself in more work. I'll bury myself in this TV show. I'll jump back on the gaming console, or I'll go, whatever my hobby is, go hang out with the guys. And this thing spirals out of control, and it escalates over and over and over.
And his answer to that in this interview is grace is magnetic.
Yes.
Grace is magnetic. If your marriage is in crisis right now, I want to just challenge you to forgive, release the things you're holding over your spouse, and let grace mark your marriage. Let grace mark. It's magnetic. It restores. Grace restores. That's what Jesus bled and died for, is for us to experience grace so that it could restore us to a relationship with him. And that's our model, which spills into our marriage. Could I one other thing that he said that I'd like for us just to dialogue about, take a short minute to talk about, and I drew a dot next to it, and you know my heart on this topic, but he said fatigue breeds wasted time.
Oh, that builds right back into what you're working on, doesn't it?
It does. Fatigue breeds wasted time. And oh man, is that not such a true statement? It left me very, evaluative, if that's a word, where I'm evaluating in my season right now. Am I wasting time, and is fatigue breeding that? And what am I doing with my fatigue? Because we have a response. We can either waste time and continue to be tired, or we can choose to press into the one who gives rest and wake up the next day productive. And not just productive at work in ministries, but productive in our marriage, where we have the emotional energy to press into our marriages.
Yes. It is. It's, there are times I feel tired, but I don't ever feel like I'm wasting time. I'm a person that I don't think I have a lot of downtime, but I can overfill my schedule.
Sure.
And that breeds a different set of problems that causes the same outcomes that we just discussed with fatigue. It is a tough area. And again, I know God's doing a work in your heart over this fatigue, this rest, this what are we giving? And I can't wait to continue this dialogue as it pops up in other places. I think God is using this to continue to shape what you're working on. And I can't wait to see this when it's completed.
Well, I am just so thankful for Brad and his wisdom. And we had pages and pages of notes. I think Ron and I could probably really take this and go for hours because we're passionate about it. But I'm just excited about the interview that we have coming. We have Mr. Ryan Frank, pastor, publisher, director of Kids Matter and MegaCon. And so I'm excited about our interview next week with Mr. Ryan Frank. And we just want you to know we are praying for you, that you would fight for intentionality in your marriage. And if you're harboring bitterness towards your spouse, could I leave you with the thought, grace is magnetic. Could you move with the help of Jesus to grace for your spouse? And what intentional action step can you take to move towards your spouse this week? We're praying for you, and we can't wait for next week.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.